بسم الله الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع سنته إلى يوم الدين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again to another episode of your weekly Islamic chat show. Guest of the week coming to you from Sharjah Television, Sharjah Broadcasting Authority. As always, I'm your host, Ismail Bullock. And today, inshallah, we want to talk about some of the characteristics. We've done shows like this before, but it's such a wide topic and a topic of such importance that we can never do enough episodes. And there's always different angles that we can mention. So we're going to emphasize again on some of the good characteristics that's required for us as Muslims. So we could say the ideal characteristics for us as Muslims or as believers. And to do that with me is no stranger to the show, Ustadh Muhammad Tim Humble. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa
Jazakallah khair for coming on.
barakatuh.
Now, as I mentioned, we've had a few episodes, or maybe definitely over the years, we've had more than a few, but it's always something you can always tackle from another angle. There's always extra benefits you can add to it because it's such a vast topic and such an important topic. And of course, we're probably going to mention some of those hadith that emphasize on the status of good character and how it bears on the Day of Judgment, etc., which I'm sure we may touch upon. So we want to talk a bit today, I guess, about the ideal characteristics that we should have as Muslims.
So just based on what you said there was a hadith that came into my mind. And it's a hadith that is narrated in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, and it's narrated by Tabarani and others. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ صَالِحَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was only sent to perfect good manners. And in another narration, مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاق, the most noble of manners. And I think this is really significant because it tells you just how important our character is if we look at the Muslim character in a broader concept than just one or two characteristics. So the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that I was only sent, the only reason that I was sent was to perfect good manners. The meaning of this is much broader than just being a nice person who doesn't get angry and takes things slowly and is kind to other people. It's much, much broader than that, because the religion of Islam is much broader than that, which the Prophet ﷺ was sent with, is much, much broader than that. It covers the way that you behave towards Allah, the way that you behave towards other people, and even the way that you are within yourself and the kind of character and traits that you try to develop within yourself. All of that comes under the issue of al-akhlaq, the way that you behave in your character.
What we can say, I guess, Islamically then, it's a complete package, because we often find people who say, like, you know, okay, he didn't believe in God, but he was so good to the animals, or so good to humanitarian disasters, etc., which is true. This is a very good trait, to be good, to help people in need, to be good to animals, to be good to people in general. But ultimately, the one who deserves us to be good to, in the sense of the way we interact with them, or the way our relationship with them, is obviously the one who created all these things that you're being kind to. So this is where Islam gives it from the whole complete package.
Absolutely, and that's the issue of the difference between the rights of Allah and the rights of creation. A lot of people give a lot of emphasis to the rights of creation. In fact, even among people of religion other than Islam, you often hear people giving precedence to the rights of creation over the rights of the Creator. So you see them giving preference to treating your neighbor well over worshipping one God, for example. And that's a classic example of giving a higher priority to the rights of people than the rights of the Lord of mankind. And so it's something that we must be very clear about, that manners includes the way that you behave towards Allah, the way that you are in the sight of Allah, and the way that you approach your worship, and the way that you approach your servitude and your state of servitude that you're in towards Allah. That is all part of manners. And that's why that hadith, which talks about I was only sent to perfect good manners, that hadith is much, much broader than just being good to your neighbor and being a nice person. But there's also something which we can link in there, which I always find very profound whenever I think about it. And that is that so many of Allah's attributes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves for those attributes to be displayed among mankind. So, for example, many of Allah's attributes are as they apply to Allah, therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and they don't apply to Allah the same way that they apply to a person. But there is an aspect, a shared meaning, a common meaning, which can be present in a person. For example, mercy. A person can be merciful, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful. But the mercy of Allah is not like the mercy of His creation in any way. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing like Him, and He is the all-hearing and the all-seeing. But Allah Azza wa Jal loves for mercy to be displayed between people. Just as He has described Himself with it, He loves for that to be present among people in the way that they deal with each other. So for example, if we take just the example of mercy, you have the hadith, Ar-Rahimun Yarhamuhum Ar-Rahman. Those who are merciful to other people, the most merciful will be merciful to them. Those who are merciful to other people, the most merciful will be merciful to them. And that's just an example of the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal loves for these attributes to be displayed and to be practiced among people, just as He has described Himself with them. And of course, that's for the attributes which are applicable in terms of that common meaning, that shared meaning, that are applicable to be used, like kindness and mercy and so on.
Something very similar to what you mentioned is the hadith that says, "Arham man fil ard yarhamukum man fis sama." Be merciful to those on earth, and the one in the heavens will be merciful to you.
Absolutely. And this can be applied to many of the names of Allah and His attributes, where there is an attribute that in terms of the basic meaning, the most simple meaning, can be applied to a person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves for you to show that. So among this is, of course, when we talked about mercy, among this is kindness. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, "Inna Allah bin nasi la ra'ufun rahim." Allah is towards all people kind and merciful. And Allah Azza wa Jal described the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as being kind and merciful. And of course, the kindness and the mercy of Allah is not like the kindness and the mercy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Allah Azza wa Jal said, "Harisun alaykum bil mu'minina ra'ufun rahim," at the end of Surah At-Tawbah, that the Prophet ﷺ, he's really keen, he really wants what's going to benefit you, and he really wants you to be the best that you can be. He's really keen for you to be successful. And He is towards the believers kind and merciful. And from this is also things like forgiveness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us, فَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا. Let them forgive and let them overlook. Do you not wish that Allah would forgive you? So again, this is the same kind of thing, having this idea of al-afu, of pardoning, of letting things go, of overlooking. And from this is one that I wanted to talk about, because I think that there's so many, and to be honest, even if you look at an encyclopedia of the manners or the character of a Muslim, you could sometimes find 40 separate attributes. There are a lot of attributes of the Muslim character to talk about. But one that I wanted to focus on, which matches in with this, but a lot of people don't think about, is al-hilm. Al-hilm, and a person being halim. It's mentioned about a number of people in the Quran, or in a number of situations in the Quran, about a person being halim. And of course, from the names of Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah is al-halim. So what is this hilm? I think it's really beautiful. There's a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said to the leader of the tribe of Abdul Qais, "Inna fika khislatayn yuhibbuhumullah, al-hilmu wal-ana." There are two characteristics within you, two aspects of your character that Allah loves. The scholars say that because he came as a sort of a new Muslim at that time, that these two characteristics were something that Allah Azza wa Jal had given to him naturally. It was his natural sort of character. But Allah Azza wa Jal loved those two things. One is al-hilm. Al-hilm is that you're not, I guess, if we just put it in a short, people translate as forbearance, but that doesn't really mean anything to a lot of people. Maybe you're slow to take revenge. You're slow to bite back at people. That when someone does something to you, you're not the first one that strikes back at them. You're somebody who you put up with difficulties that other people cause for you, and you're not quick to lash out.
So you could kind of say it's a bit like a combination of forbearing and patience, and it says you bear things with patience.
You bear things with patience, but the key thing here is that you have the ability to lash out and you don't. And the ana, which goes with it, is that you take things slowly, that you're a person who gives consideration and care to things. And that could be applied to so many aspects. It could be applied to speech, it could be applied to action, it could be applied to so many different things that before you speak, you really think about what you're going to say.
So you're not hasty, basically.
You're not hasty. You take things slowly. And as we said, al-hilm is an attribute of Allah Azza wa Jal. And as it applies to Allah, it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from His right, would be to punish all of us for the first time that we did a sin. The first time that one of us did a sin, the day that we reached adulthood, and we did a sin on that day, from the right of Allah Azza wa Jal is that Allah Azza wa Jal could punish us with Jahannam forever. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't punish us at that time. And again another sin, and Allah doesn't punish us, and another sin, and Allah doesn't punish us, and another, and another, and another. Again and again, Allah is giving you chances to change, chances to repent. And so that is how it applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah Azza wa Jal, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is dhu intiqam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is severe in punishment, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is severe in retribution, but Allah Azza wa Jal gives so many chances to people. And that is something that we should try to take a benefit from in our own character, which is to be someone who doesn't lash out very quickly verbally. How many people, when someone says something to them, they lash out, and sometimes they lash out with something much worse than what the other person had said to them. They get hot-headed, the anger rises up, they don't control it, and they lash out at somebody verbally, physically. And then afterwards comes a regret that, oh, I didn't take it slowly, I didn't think about the consequences of my actions. So a major part of the Muslim character that I wanted to just touch upon as we were talking about the things that relate to Allah Azza wa Jal is that issue of forbearance, that issue of just taking your time into and giving chances and not lashing out and not allowing your anger to overcome you. And then along with that is that other one that the Prophet mentioned, of giving consideration to things before doing them. A person, before you make big decisions and before you are going to say something that's going to have a profound effect on somebody, you take it slowly and you have a think about what it is that you're going to say. And I think those two are very important parts of the Muslim personality.
I mean, that is a problem because we find that nowadays many people are very hasty, many people are very hot-tempered, many people don't have patience, they don't have this, these characters we're talking about, and they just are very quick to fight back or answer back or take hasty action. And we see this leads to a lot of trouble, not just in our daily lives, in society in general.
And that kind of brings us to another attribute or aspect of a Muslim's character, which is softness and gentleness. Being a person who is generally soft and gentle. And I always think of the ayah in Surah Al Imran, which Allah Azza wa Jalla said, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. That by a mercy of Allah, you were gentle with them. You were layyin, you somebody who was easy and gentle with them. And if you were harsh and hard-hearted, they would have fled from around you. That's the Prophet ﷺ. They would have fled from the truth because he came with the truth.
I'll just hold you on that point. And please join us, inshallah, after this short break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Now, just before we can recap, we mentioned the verse where Allah said to the Prophet Muhammad that if you'd have been harsh on them, that they would have basically just run away, away from you and away from the message.
Absolutely. And I think when you think about this ayah, one of the things that just strikes you is the Prophet ﷺ was sent with the truth. And the truth is naturally sweet, right? The truth generally is naturally attractive. it matches the fitrah, your heart loves it, you want to go for the truth, you're inclined towards the truth. Some of the scholars said this is the meaning of Hanif, that the Hunafa, the people who follow the religion of Ibrahim, that the meaning is that they incline towards the truth. But despite that, if that truth was delivered with harshness, it wouldn't have been accepted by the Sahaba. The Sahaba would not have accepted that truth if it was delivered with harshness and roughness. And there are so many ahadith about this. There is a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said that, shall I not tell you of the one who the fire is prohibited for them and they are prohibited for it? And this person is completely prohibited from the hellfire. They said, yes, O Messenger of Allah. And he said, it is prohibited for everyone who is hayyinun, layyinun, sahlun, qarib. Everyone who is approachable and easygoing and gentle and so on with the people. So I believe this is something also which is really, really important to have in a person's character, is that a person develops these characteristics. So from these characteristics is that the person should be sahl. They should be easygoing with people. They shouldn't be somebody who is difficult with people or who makes it difficult for people. You see this so many times when we unnecessarily make things difficult for other people, be it at work or at home or whatever it is. Somebody asks you for something and you're unnecessary. You're a hard person. Or sometimes, when people talk about the person who's hard to reach, and I don't mean hard to reach in terms of communication, but in terms of just a hard person to connect with, a hard person to reach out to and to be able to sort of interact with, a very distant, very sort of cold person. So it's about being easygoing. It's about being approachable. That people feel that they can approach you and they can ask you things, and you're not, again, we talk about not biting your head off and things like that. It's a person is a person who is approachable. It's qarib, it's approachable.
And that's something that comes to my mind because we find with some people who are practicing Muslims that as they become supposedly more practicing, they become harsher towards other people. And it may not be people that they deem to be practicing Islam incorrectly, just even generally. They take on this I'm better than everybody else kind of thing, and they tend to be rude to other Muslims who are less religious than them, to non-Muslims, and we've seen that quite a lot. And we know in reality, the more practicing as a Muslim you should be, the more overall you should be politer and kinder and more respectful. So there's definitely a disconnection there. If you find that you become practicing, but you become more of an aggressive person, or you walk down the street giving everybody aggressive looks or being rude to everybody, then there's definitely
there's something missing. But what I was thinking of there is that just brought me onto sort of, maybe we could talk briefly about hikmah, because this is probably what is missing in this case. You have somebody who loves for the sake of Allah, and the reason they love what they love, this aggressive, angry, kind of rude person, is that they've started practicing Islam. They love for the sake of Allah. They have some hatred for the sake of Allah, so they don't like the fact that there's somebody doing something that displeases Allah. But what they're missing here is they're missing the application of that. They've got it. It's too raw. It's not controlled, and it's not being directed in the right way. So it's not being directed in the way that the Prophet ﷺ used to direct it. Instead, it's just a raw feeling which is out of control, and it leads them to be very rude with people and to drive people away. And from a da'wah perspective, how many, and we could just touch upon this briefly, but how many of these characteristics they're essential for the person giving da'wah. And perhaps that is why Allah Azza wa Jal said about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You are on the highest standard of character, because that standard of character is one of the major things that brings people towards Islam. So one of the things that is really important is this idea of hikmah. And people often misunderstand hikmah. One of the things people often understand from hikmah is that hikmah means softness, and hikmah means gentleness in an absolute sense. Actually, hikmah is knowing when to apply softness and when to be a little harder and a little stauncher, a little stricter, and when to be gentle and when to be, a little bit more firm, and so on. Hikmah is something which is a gift from Allah. وَمَن يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Whoever's been given wisdom, then they've been given a great deal of good. Wisdom is knowing when to apply those different sort of characteristics, because there are times when you do need to have a firm word with people. And you know, one of the things that I criticize sometimes about other religions when they talk about character is they focus purely upon softness to the extent that even if the rights of Allah are being transgressed, even if the worst things are being done, you know, even if somebody slaps you on the face, you should turn around and let them slap the other cheek, and so on. This really isn't, in some circumstances it might be praiseworthy, but it's not complete. It's not a perfect character. It's a character of somebody who's so soft that he's just getting, you know, them pushed around, beaten around, and the rights of Allah are being transgressed, people are being hurt, the rights of other human beings are being abused, and yet the person, the only answer that they have is just to show the other cheek and say, you know, now you've slapped me on this cheek, now slap me on this one. Instead, hikmah is to know when to do that and when to be more firm. When should I now take a stance and bring out the other aspects which we haven't yet talked about, like bravery, and, you know, we talked about the aspects of manlyhood and things like that. Those type of things, when should we bring that out? There were times when the Prophet ﷺ was extremely firm. But the general, there's one thing that I think is really important, is that the asl, the basic principle of a Muslim is softness and gentleness. And it's only when you see that softness and gentleness is not going to work and it's not going to achieve the outcome, that's when you move away from it. And you don't move away from softness and gentleness to 100% harshness and violence, and, or, you know, not at all. All you do is you just become a little more firm according to the needs of the situation. And that comes with experience. It comes with, and that brings you on, we talked about hilm earlier. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمْ وَإِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمْ. That hilm, forbearance, comes from practicing forbearance. And knowledge comes from learning, practicing knowledge. You know, you're actually making an effort to gain knowledge. All of the aspects of character are like that.
So you have to train yourself, basically.
You have to train yourself. You have to train yourself to be that person. And so hikmah comes with experience, and that's why generally hikmah is often associated with older people. It's often associated with people who have had, you know, varied life experiences. They generally tend to be more wise, and generally youth is, and it's not absolutely true, but people associate youth with being very rash and, you know, quick to respond and not having wisdom. But actually wisdom is knowing when to respond quickly and when to respond slowly. When should I let this go? Because, for example, if you were to let every single thing go, there would not only would that contradict many of the ayat of the Quran, but it would also lead to a huge harm coming back upon yourself and upon other people. But hikmah is to know when. And what we say to someone is, if you don't know whether it's a time to be soft or a little bit firmer, then softness is that's what you have to be. Because softness, that is the default position of a Muslim's character. And it's only when you see that the consequences and the situation dictates that you need to be a little bit firmer. And that doesn't mean that you need to be, you know, you need to go over those levels, but you just need to be a little bit stronger and a little bit firmer in order to achieve a better outcome, you know, out of that. So I think the balance in the Muslim character is something that's very important, that wasatiyya, being just, you know, balanced between extremes. We're not so extremely soft that we allow ourselves to be trampled upon, and we're not so extremely firm that we push people away. Rather, we edge on the side of softness, and we can be a little more firm when the situation dictates.
I mean, that reminds me of the verse, the meaning of which, you know, call to your Lord upon hikmah and maw'idhat al-hasana, like with good words. And then if you debate, or I guess you could say debate is a good word, maybe argue, but if you have some kind of argumentative debate or discussion, then do it in the way that is best. So this is also very important, because a lot of people, again, they think because they're upon the truth, that therefore they can speak, and we see this even sometimes in da'wah, where people are speaking a demeaning way to the other person. Maybe sometimes the person doesn't quite get the concept they're trying to talk about in Islam, or it doesn't click to them straight away, so they laugh at them and say, how can you not get it? And, you know, we see this So this is also important, that it has to be with wisdom, because you doing that could push that person who could have been interested in Islam, but then you started laughing at him or spoke to him in a derogatory manner because he didn't quite agree with you on an aspect, or he didn't understand what you're trying to say. You pushed him away from Islam because you did not have wisdom. Wisdom would have been to say, if I laugh at this guy now, or if I show that I just don't understand how he can't understand what I'm saying, I'm going to push him away. So I will have this hilm, I will be forbearing, and I will hold back, I'll have patience and let him say what he's got to say. And so this is also very important.
Absolutely. And I think that this aspect of this person who in that kind of situation, it's very, some of the bad traits, and we could say that for every good trait of the Muslim character, there's an opposite trait that you're supposed to get rid of. There's no doubt that the nature of human beings is when you have an argument with somebody, often what it is that when you're debating or discussing, having a heated discussion with someone, you want to forcefully, destroy the other person, even if your argument isn't completely correct. And so that kind of can come out in people. And it's not just about that individual themselves, but also about all the people watching, all the people around. Whenever I see these dawah discussions, it always amazes me that you can actually have someone who has the falsehood, a false argument, who is calling to something which is completely opposing Islam. But because of the way they present it and the manners they present it in, it attracts the foolish people in the audience. It doesn't attract the wise people. It doesn't attract the people of knowledge, because they are somewhat protected from the sort of facade of that good character and good manners. But I do recall a debate that happened between a preacher from another religion and between a Muslim. And the Muslim guy was on point. I mean, he brought the evidences, but because he did it in a very, very harsh and a very rough, tough way, and he did it in a way that was really intended to really
demean him.
Yeah, really to demean and hurt the other person, like
a mockery of him, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Because of that, what happened was that the neutral people in the audience who were not supporters of either actually sided with the false argument rather than the true one. And they came out saying, you know what it is? He didn't really prove himself very, academically very well, but what beautiful manners, and that's a big danger. That's the opposite of what we talked about with the Prophet ﷺ, when we talked about how his good manners led people to accept the truth from him. Likewise, somebody's good manners can actually lead people to accept the falsehood, especially the vulnerable people who don't have knowledge and might be a little bit foolish in that regard. So, I mean, for sure, what we talked about also wasatiyya. I mentioned that briefly, but I think that's one of the most fundamental parts of the Muslim character, to the point that almost every aspect of the Muslim character can be brought back to wasatiyya, which is balance. And sometimes people use the word moderation, but I think moderation, sometimes people misunderstand moderation as being just a little bit of good, don't do too much good, not that kind of moderation, but being balanced, neither being extreme on any side. And it's really sad when you hear people associate Islam with extremes of any kind, because Islam is the least extreme religion and way of life that exists. There is nothing that is less, that is more balanced and less extreme. But extremism isn't one side only. It's not going over the bounds only. It's also falling way short, both of them. Negligence and falling very short and not giving due care and attention is a kind of extremism, just like going overboard and doing way too much and going over the limits is also a kind of extremism. And Islam is right in the middle. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ ummatan wasata. Like this, we have made you a balanced and a just ummah. And one of the meanings also of the word wasat is like some of the scholars say, is adl, is just.
I'll just hold you on that point. And please join us, inshallah, after this short break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Now, brother Ustadh Muhammad Tim, just before the break, we'd spoken about this wasatiyya and this being moderate, being, you could say even balanced, but in the sense of you don't become too lax and too relaxed and too slacking in practicing, but then again, you don't become over, basically extreme. But it can work both ways. And then you went on to another topic of being just.
So I was saying that the word wasatiyya, some of the scholars, when they came to the ayah, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, in this way we made you a middle ummah, they said that the meaning of wasata here means adla, it means just. And justice is obviously something which is extremely important in Islam, even to speak out, even against your own self. And Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَنْ لَا تَعْدِلُوا اعْدِلُوا هُوَ أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Do not let the hatred of a people. So this is a people who drove the Prophet ﷺ out from his home, who insulted him, who tortured the Muslims. Do not let the hatred of those people prevent you from justice. Be just. This is closer to taqwa. So that's a profound ayah when you really think about what those people did to the Muslims, and then they were told that even though they did those things to you, even though they were your enemies, don't let that prevent you from being somebody who is just. And like we said, I think that justice starts with yourself. If you can't be just with yourself and truthful about yourself, then it's very unlikely that you'll be just with other people and truthful with other people. So being truthful starts with yourself, and being just starts with yourself. So it means that you're willing to admit when you're wrong. It means that you are willing to speak the truth even when it might make difficulty for you, or it might put you into a difficult situation, because of the fact that you've developed that characteristic of justice and then linked to that truthfulness. If we can sort of go to the other side now, because we talked about wasatiyya and we talked about being balanced.
Before we do that, I just wanted to ask you a question actually.
Go for it.
If I'm recording correctly, the verse that says that we have made you a middle nation, if I remember correctly, the verse after that says, so that you as a people may be witnesses over mankind. So what does that mean exactly?
So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made, and in more than one ayah of the Quran, there is this ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, there is one in Surah Al-Nisa, that Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about this ummah being witnesses. And there are many ways of understanding that, but I'll just give one that is perhaps the most obvious and the easiest to understand. It's on the Day of Judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, of course, ask all of the prophets and their people about the message that they delivered and the message that was received and who acted upon it and who didn't. There will be many prophets who their witness, the people who stand up for them and confirm and witness before Allah that prophet spoke the truth and that prophet delivered the message, will be the Muslims. And that may sound strange because, for example, how will a Muslim testify to what Isa alayhi salam did when we did not live in the time of Isa alayhi salam? But because of the Quran, because of what the Quran tells us, this ummah will be a witness over all of those other nations. A witness in truth, in terms of a witness as to what the truth was, and a witness as to the fact that the prophets correctly delivered their message as Allah commanded them, even if their people turn around and say, no, we didn't get the message, or we didn't understand, or the Muslim will come forward and say, that's not the case. Rather, the message was delivered as as that prophet was commanded to do, because we know that from what Allah Azza wa Jal told us in the Quran. And likewise, we're a witness in the sense of a witness for truth, because we bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship except Allah, that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. So we have this statement, this witness statement of the statement to witness the truth, and that's another aspect of it as well. And there are other ways of looking at the ayah as well.
So you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about another aspect of the wasatiyya.
So I was thinking, if we talked about wasatiyya, and we've talked so far about softness and about gentleness and about, there is something which doesn't contradict that, but it lies perhaps on the other side of the line, which I feel is really, really missing among the Muslim character today. And broadly, you might want to label it, perhaps the right word to label it is rujula, manlyhood. The aspects of, and perhaps another good word is chivalry, perhaps. Because when you look at chivalry in the dictionary, chivalry is the qualities of a warrior. The qualities that would traditionally be considered to be the qualities of a warrior. And there's some amazing things in there that we often, we don't encourage people to develop. it might be things like bravery, honor, and keeping your word, leadership, being a person who is like وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ imama, make us an imam for the pious. There are so many things within that you can put down, which are which I feel are often neglected in our time. I feel a lot of the times that when we talk about the character, we always talk about mercy, and we talk about forgiveness, and we talk about softness, and that's of course a huge part of the Muslim character. But also, a person developing the qualities of leadership, being a person who has honor, being a person who has chivalry, being a person who has bravery. These are all aspects also of the Muslim character.
You could even say, I guess, being, as they'd say, being not necessarily always a man, but being, as they say, a man of his word.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
being
really
principled.
Interesting. Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that when you look back at how the people, like, for example, if you just think of any great Muslim warrior like Khalid ibn al-Walid radiyallahu anhu, for example, you think about Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, or you think about Umar ibn al-Khattab. What were the qualities that really made them like that? It isn't just bravery. It's not just being really, really brave, but it's also about the fact that being a man of the word, like we said, about chivalry, about good treatment about sticking up for the rights of the needy and the weak, and so on, about being a person who embodies all of those qualities, more than just being a person who is just on its own brave, truthfulness, and all of those things. So I think this is something that in our time today is much, much needed, because especially for a number of reasons, especially as there's sadly a big push in terms of non-Muslim thought, that there's a huge push towards removing these qualities from young children, like from young people, like taking them away and making people very, very, soft and submissive, and not having those qualities anymore. And also, the lifestyle we lead doesn't bring those qualities out unless you encourage them. So, for example, the children of the Arabs, the young babies, they would be sent out to the desert to live with the Bedouins, and they would develop certain qualities, nobility, generosity, the way that you treat your guest, chivalry, bravery, and things that you learn when you live in the middle of the desert and you live in a very harsh environment, and you develop a kind of resilience, maybe that's a good word, like independent thought and things like that. That it doesn't match very well with the lifestyle we live. We live a very blessed and a very sheltered,
very
pampered lifestyle,
wrapped up in cotton wool, as they say.
And often our children, when they're put in a situation where they need to show leadership, where they're in a situation where something has happened and they need to take responsibility and step forward, and they need to show independent thought. For example, when their peers might ask them to do something haram, might ask them to take something haram, to do something haram, to engage in something haram. When we need them to have independent thought and a strong personality and the ability to say, no, I'm not going to do this, and the ability to be like a leader and an example for other people, we find that often because of that lifestyle being very, very pampered and they struggle to step up to when that time is needed. And the problem is that we see our children as being as being children, but the reality is that there will come a time when those children are the adults the adults of this ummah, the adults of the Muslim world, and they're also going to need to step up and take responsibility and carry forward the projects that their elders have left behind for them. So I feel this is something that we also need to work on developing within people. And again, the key thing here is that your character is something you have to develop. It's not something that you can just you can have some traits that you are inclined towards because of your nature. You can be naturally quite a gentle person, you can be naturally not an angry person, but you have to do so much work to actually develop your character and develop these traits in yourself and develop them in people around you, develop them, teach them to your family and encourage them among your family. Encourage all of these different traits that a Muslim has. Encourage them to be soft and merciful and gentle, but also brave and independent, have independent thought and have the attributes of leadership, and to be respectful to other people, but also to be someone that isn't influenced too much by other people. They have humility, but at the same time they can hold their own in a gathering. That kind of balance and that kind of development that is needed to develop that character, it comes through a huge number of things. So one thing is obviously conveying knowledge, so conveying the ahadith and the ayat which speak about character, and then encouraging people to understand what that character means or what that aspect means and how to implement it. But also life, getting experiences and having responsibility and things like that, which when you go through those experiences also develops your character in a positive way. So you as a parent, you see your children go through many experiences, right? You see them go through many difficulties and tough situations. When they go through those tough situations and difficulties, it's about you molding their character. That, look, you've been through a hard time. That should make you have more sabr. It should make you stronger. It should make you more independent. It should make you more reliant upon Allah. At the same time, you had other experiences that should make you more soft and gentle and merciful towards others, and you maintain that balance in everything you do. That would stand them in very good stead as they grow up. So I think it's an important point about developing character for ourselves and our children.
Well, Jazakallah khair for coming on and sharing that with us. And again, for the viewers, may Allah reward you for tuning in. Hopefully, again, this has been another beneficial episode from the ones we've done in the past over time about the Muslim character, and some very important aspects we mentioned here that we should try to refine or add to our character if we don't already have that, and if we do have some of it, to try and improve it as much as we can. And as we learned today, a lot of this is from practice and by being patient and persevering to gain or to refine yourself in these characteristics. And until next time, inshallah, I leave you as always with the greetings of Islam, the greetings of peace. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.